Should I fight or just walk away? Being strong doesn't always mean you have to fight the battle. True strength is being adult enough to walk away from the nonsense with your head held high.
Well, hello, my brothers and sisters of the Nerd Nation. I, as always, am Jim, here to bring you another one of our weekly Nerd Nation public service announcements. And as the title would indicate, this one has to do with fighting or walking away. Really, a lot of it ties into themes that we have seen even back in the first chapter review that I did of One Piece. But now, of course, recently, over the last few that I've done, we saw a particular instance where you know, a lot of people are split and divided on it. They feel like Luffy and Zoro should have went one way and they went another. And I'm just going to give my personal opinion and tell you a couple of quick stories that probably won't be so quick, so buckle up, about why I believe that the hardest thing to do is to actually walk away. Now, I'm going to preface this whole thing by saying that when I was a teenager especially, I was quicker to throw a punch or to get into a confrontation if someone provoked me, and I was more apt to do that than to walk away. Let's put it that way. So I had a very short temper, and still do in a lot of ways, but I try to control and handle things much differently. So the first story is about I was in high school, and I don't know how old I was, but my next youngest sister, who's about 5 or 6 years younger than me, was just turning into a teenager. I actually have 3 sisters, and they're all very beautiful. But she was I don't know, maybe 13 years old, and a particular I wouldn't say that he was so much a friend as he was just kind of an acquaintance that hung out with the group of guys that I hung out with. He had been over at my house, and I had kind of seen him, you know, giving her some looks that I didn't appreciate or approve of, and I kind of let it go. But then I heard over the subsequent days from other people in our group and other ones that he had made some comments about her that I didn't think were appropriate, especially because of the fact that we were all 16, 17, 18 in high school, and she was just turning 13. Plus, it's my younger sister, and one thing that I can impart on everybody is that no one ever fucks with my family. You can mess with me all day long, that's fine, but you do not fuck with the ones that I love, the ones that I care about. So, in a lot of ways, I can be very much like Luffy in that sense of, do not mess with my friends. Anyway, that again is besides the point. So, I wind up finding out about this, and I decide I'm going to beat the shit out of this guy. I'm going to teach him a lesson, right? So I lure him and a buddy of his down to the park in school that was right down the street from my house. And I got 2 buddies with me, you know, for backup, just in case something goes wrong. And I think he knew the whole time that I was not happy and that it had gotten back to him that some shit was going to go down. But I still played it cool. And I did this for about 5 or 10 minutes while we talked, and I kind of danced him around in a mental circle, you know, and just used a little psychological warfare on him. And then as he was sitting on the swing and his defenses were down and he wasn't really paying much attention, I proceeded to walk over, grab the swing chain, wrap it around his neck, and beat the living fuck out of him. And contrary to what a lot of people think about what you see in action movies and stuff like that, if you've never been in a lot of fights or any fights yourself, the average fight probably lasts about 45 to 60 seconds, okay? It just happens like that. It's over before you know it. It's not like in movies where it's drawn out and there's a bunch of kicks and punches and blocks and everything else. It goes one way or the other, usually very fast, and escalates, and that's what happened. Now, my buddies made sure that his buddy didn't interfere, and it was a very one-sided fight. He might have scratched or clawed at me, but I beat the living fuck out of him. I broke a couple of ribs. I knocked out a tooth. He did not look very good when we were done, and I'm not telling you this because I'm proud of it. I'm actually not proud of it at all. The school that we were at was actually under construction. They were doing an addition on it. So as me and my 2 buddies were walking away from this mess, this catastrophe, this beating, the other guy that was with him, who was very quick with his temper as well, started picking up chunks of rocks or concrete or whatever had been broken off from where they were, from where they were doing the construction. And I'm about 50 feet away at the time, and he's throwing them at me and yelling, "Fucker! Fucker, I'm gonna get you!" And he's throwing them. And they're sailing 5 feet, 3 feet wide of me, and I'm like, these aren't even in the same time zone as me. So I turn around, and I say, "Fuck you," you know, and I keep walking. Next thing you know, everything's black. My face, I got dirt in my mouth. Obviously, one of the rocks that he threw, and I wound up seeing it, a buddy of mine picked it up and showed me the blood on it, was about the size of a baseball. He actually had connected and hit me in the back of the ear. Till this day, my left ear sticks out further than my right ear. It's hard to tell because I'm always moving around like a fucking crazed jackal. But that's even why my glasses don't sit right on my ears, and I have to constantly adjust them because one ear is actually a little bit lower and deformed than the other ear because this thing was pretty much half ripped off in the back. I had to have several stitches. Anyway, I popped right back up. I was in shock. I had no idea what was going on. My buddies wind up grabbing me, even though I was going to go and literally kill the other guy. That was my thought. They wound up kind of just dragging me back to my house. Ambulance was called. I went to the emergency room. I got the stitches and everything else. Through a series of hearing tests and everything else, it deemed that there was no permanent damage weeks or months later. So anyway, as I went and healed up and I had this big, cauliflower-looking ear thing over my ear for a couple of weeks, all I could think about was getting this guy back that had thrown the rock at me, right? So one day I was hanging out after high school. There was an area that we called Smoker's Corner. I used to smoke cigarettes, probably amongst other things as well, but we'll get into that. It's a story for another time. And everybody did kind of hang out there after school and between classes. You know, a lot of people that did smoke, and they'd hang out there, commiserate, bullshit, whatever. So I'm sitting out there one day, and this fella named Brandon, and he goes and he rides up on his bike, and I come up to him, and I just wanted to start a fight with him, right? And I said, give me a cigarette. He says, well, I don't have any. And I said, well, that's unfortunate for you. And I grabbed his head, and I smashed it against the handlebars of his bike, and as I pulled him off his bike, I beat the living fuck out of him while people stood around and laughed and ridiculed him, for obviously for getting his ass beaten, for catching his lunch, whatever you want to call it. And again, it's not something that I am proud of, but I did. I was very one-sided. I beat the shit out of him. And I did it because I thought that that's what I needed to do now because of what he had done to me, right? After all, I had to get stitches and everything else. I almost lost my ear, so, I mean, it's only right. I had to beat the fuck out of him. Isn't that right? So anyways, his parents wind up putting an order of protection on me, or some kind of court order. Wound up having to go back and forth to court. Friends and people that didn't want to be involved, that were out there, had to get involved and get called as witnesses and everything else. Ultimately, a restraining order got put against me. We couldn't go near each other, but mainly me near him because of attacking him. So anyway, a couple weeks, maybe a couple months later, it's still the same school year. I go out to Smoker's Corner, and I don't happen to have any friends out there that particular day. But 3 of his buddies are out there, right? And those 3 decide to go and systematically jump me. Now, it wasn't like a traditional beating where I curled up into a ball and 3 guys punched and kicked me, again, like you'd see in the movies. They took turns, and the nice thing is that I was in pretty good shape at the time, so I did pretty well for probably about 4 or 5 minutes of this encounter, but eventually was just overwhelmed and ran out of energy. I mean, that's all it is. The bottom line is I did pretty well for a while, but I wound up catching a beating, okay? It wasn't as bad as probably the ones that I had handed out, but it certainly didn't feel good. So, the next day, I'm in the office at school and getting in trouble for something, getting called down to the principal's office, the administrator's office or something. I see one of the guys that jumped me the day before, and he's got his hand wrapped. The idiot broke his thumb because when he punched me, he put his thumb on the inside of his fingers. Now, anybody who knows anything about fighting knows that you put your thumb on the outside of your fingers. So I saw that as a reason to lay into him and tell him that he's not even good enough to beat the shit out of me, that even though him and 2 other guys attacked me, he's still the one that wound up having to go to the emergency room. So, of course, that provoked things, and we were going to set up a fight after school, a big rumble type of thing. And people were making bets prior to this thing happening. I had a buddy that was going to come out there. He had nunchucks in his bag in case I got overwhelmed and things went south. It was a real clusterfuck, right? Anyway, and this was wound up leading up. I was probably a couple weeks later now after his thumb had healed up, maybe even a month later, But what started it was me in the office making fun of him for not even being able to properly be able to jump somebody. You had the numbers, you had everything else, and you couldn't even know how to make a fist, you dumb motherfucker. So anyway, that winds up happening. And then I fight him out in there in the woods, we call it the trails, and I wind up winning. I wind up beating the shit out of him, and it was the type of thing where I didn't even beat him until he couldn't move anymore. I beat him until I felt that there was no need to show anymore that I was better. Okay, at the time I was in good shape. At the time I was in Taekwondo, so I was superior in a lot of ways because I knew American boxing and I could incorporate, throwing a kick, taking out a kneecap, whatever the case was. The point was that he was outmatched, a one-on-one, and that's what it was. It was a guaranteed one-on-one fight. Many people were around to make sure nothing else happened. Nobody else jumped in. So anyway, the whole point to this story is things went back and forth and escalated for a long time, and for years, I looked over my shoulder when I walked home from school. For years, as my brothers and sisters, my younger brothers and sisters, went to that school as they got older, I worried about something happen to them because of my mistakes, because of what I did. And there was a couple of near misses, I guess you would call, that I wound up only finding out about years down the road, where a buddy had actually saved me from, getting jumped or getting, this and that as retribution for what I had done to these other guys. So my point was, this all started on defending my family, defending my blood, defending my sister's honor, all this type of stuff. Even though she was never, touched, she wasn't assaulted, anything like that, my temper was short enough to where I felt that was enough to go and do what I did. And now that followed me around for years. And for years and years, again, I looked over my shoulder and I didn't know what I should do. Many times walking home from school, if I was by myself, I was wondering, is somebody going to be around the corner? Is somebody going to catch up with me? Because there's always somebody out there that cares about that person that you fought, that you beat the shit out of. So the other story is much shorter and much quicker. A friend of mine and I were hanging out at Galaxy Arcade, a place here in Illinois, where I live in the Chicagoland area. Back in the 80s and 90s, arcades were real big because there wasn't home video game consoles. They weren't up to par with what you had in the arcades. Even PCs weren't. So you'd go to the arcade and we'd hang out. And one night after we're getting out of the arcade, we were going and leaving the plaza, walking across the plaza to go take the mile walk home that we had to do. And we live in the suburbs of Chicago. It's not like we're in the inner city or anything like that. But anyway, a carload of guys goes and stops us and pulls up. And I recognize one of the guys as being a recently graduated senior from Palatine High School, where I went, and a few of the other guys. And I never knew him, but these guys get out, and the one guy was just acting real funny, real fidgety. Got up in my face. I don't even remember what he tried to insinuate or start, but he was looking for a fight is what he was looking for. And he wound up hitting me. First time he hit me, he knocked my glasses off. I bent down, I picked him up, I put him back on. I looked at him, I didn't say anything cocky, didn't say anything to try to get out of the fight, but I also didn't say anything to incite the fight either, because the friend that was with me was not a person that I could count on and that I believed I could trust in to back me up. And I knew that I couldn't take 4 guys. I knew maybe 1 or 2 on a good day, but not 4, okay? It's not like the movies, So anyway, what winds up happening is one of the guys from Galaxy Arcade that knew me as a regular in there saw what was happening, came outside. This guy was an ex-Marine. He came outside and he stopped the whole thing right there. Cops pulled up and everything. I wind up getting in trouble because me and my buddy were out a few minutes after curfew. We were still like 16 at the time. Anyway, the point is that I wound up biting my tongue and not fighting. And at the time, I didn't know why. I didn't know if I was just being the bigger person. I didn't know if it was just because I couldn't beat all 4 of them and I didn't trust my buddy with me. But I wind up finding out a couple of days later that after everybody spread, nobody got arrested or anything like that because there was no real fight to speak of. I just got smacked once, This guy, I guess for the first time, him and his buddies had tried some speed or some cocaine or something like that. And this guy wound up going to a party afterwards, and he got into a fight with somebody, and he actually went and pulled a knife that he had on him and stabbed a guy 2 or 3 times. Didn't kill him, put him in the hospital for a while. This guy wound up spending a few years in jail. He had just graduated high school, so obviously it probably killed a lot of his career dreams and everything else, but that's not my problem. That's not my point. My point is that when I thought about it later on, if I had engaged him and I had tried to fight him, whether I could have taken him and his 4 buddies or not, it wouldn't have mattered. Would I have been the one that was laying there bleeding out, getting stabbed? You think about those type of things and you think, is it better to just walk away? And I remember that night, he wound up telling me, whispered in my ear as we were getting pulled apart by the cops and everything else. He whispered in my ear and he said, "You never know who you're fucking with." And I didn't know what he meant at the time, But now when you think about it, any idiot can get a hold of a gun or a knife or any type of weapon, and it doesn't take a smart person or even a brave person to go and pull a trigger or to go and pull a knife and to stab somebody or to hit somebody in the head with a crowbar, a hammer, a baseball bat. It doesn't, and anybody can do it. So the one thing that I tried to impart, and you can go back and watch my first One Piece review with the whole Luffy and Shanks thing, and Luffy being so angry that Shanks didn't fight Haguma. That's the one thing that I've always tried to teach people now for probably the last 15 years, 10, 15 years, is that it is so much harder to just walk away. It is so much harder to just say, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to fight. And I can tell you this from experience, because I may not have been here Well, had I thrown a punch in that second altercation I explained about, I may or probably wouldn't have been here right now to talk to you to tell you this. So fate and life has a funny way of working things out. But I was always very quick-tempered, very short-tempered until after that moment, a few days later when I found out what had happened and everything else. And since then, I've been much less apt to go and throw a punch. Don't get me wrong, I still do hurt people. I hurt people sometimes with my words, sometimes with my actions. But I try to avoid physical confrontation at all costs because, as I said, you never know who's got... Somebody cares about that person that you got into a fight with. And whether it's a brother, a sister, a cousin, an uncle, or whatever, you don't want to be looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life. And nobody ever wins a fight. Even fights like the first one I described at the school when I beat the shit out of the kid, even if I hadn't gotten hit in the head with a fucking rock, the next day my fist was sore. And I had broken blood vessels and bruised knuckles because your body is now, you're not meant to just beat on another human being. Bone against bone, tendon against, it's just not supposed to happen. So the thing that I really, really just hope that I can impart on everybody here is that it doesn't make you less of a person. It doesn't make you a pussy. It doesn't make you a bitch to walk away from a fight. It actually makes you the bigger person, and it makes you the better person if you can avoid confrontation. And people can say whatever they want. It's because you're too weak. It's because you're too this. It's because you're too that. I can tell you for a fact that's not true. It's more difficult to avoid a fight and a confrontation than to think and act quickly and throw a punch. So that's the Nerd Nation PSA for today, and I certainly hope that if just one person, if this can help them in life, it certainly will be worth it to me, and I certainly just hope that I can impart my experiences upon you. I actually I had a couple of drinks last night, and I was starting to tape this and whatnot because I haven't told many people about this. My wife knows about it, but I've never even told these stories to my kids, so... it's definitely something that's very personal, both stories, because I'm not proud of the first ones. There was a couple of those confrontations where I was a clear-cut winner, but I certainly didn't feel like it, So I never felt good about, breaking somebody else's ribs or, knocking somebody's tooth out or giving somebody a black eye. And you shouldn't either. So, brothers and sisters, remember to leave a comment down below if you have any personal experiences you'd like to share. Certainly feel free to hit the thumbs up, the like button if you should think that I deserve it, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. We'll look forward to catching all of you in the next one, Nation.
There are some people who seem angry and continuously look for conflict. Walk away. The battle they are fighting isn't with you. It's with themselves.